Hello and welcome back. Today we are here with a very cool and very innovative Nimai Delgado. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
You are the first ever vegan IFBB men's physique pro in history. You have never in your life eaten meat, and you were featured on the cover of Muscle and Fitness this past year. You are in the new movie, The GameChangers, and you are a huge influencer on social media and run VeganFitness and the podcast Generation V. So you're quite busy.
Yes, very.
I'm very excited to get into your story because I think you're super inspirational. Where and how did you grow up, and how did that impact who you are today?
I always have to start at the beginning because there's so many layers here, but I always start with the story of how my parents met because it all begins there. Both of my parents are from Argentina. They were born and raised in Buenos Aires, and they grew up a traditional kind of Argentinian lifestyle for the most part. And whenever my mom was 15, she actually had a boyfriend, and barbecuing and, eating animals and having livestock was really common back then. And it probably still is now. And her boyfriend slaughtered a pig in front of her for a barbecue that they were having. And my mom became instantly traumatized by it. And she vowed at 15 to never consume animal flesh again.
Good for her.
And I think that's kind of where this whole story kind of began, because that in turn led her on a path to discovering her own philosophy of how she wanted to live her life. And it turns out there was a temple that was offering vegetarian food. So she would go there for the vegetarian food, and she ended up listening to the lectures and really resonating with some of the messages behind the lectures, and decided at 19, at this point it was a few years later, at 19 she decided she was going to renounce all material possessions and fully devote herself to her spiritual life. And that is kind of how she met my dad in the temple. He was also going through a similar stage in his life. And they bounced around from temple to temple. Their goal was to continue to spread this message of compassion and love. And they went from Argentina to Brazil, and then Brazil to Miami. And then they drove from Miami all the way up to Mississippi, of all places, because their guru had basically found them a place to live. And that's where I was born, in a little, it was a farm community in South Mississippi. It was predominantly Hindu. So there was a Hindu temple, and there was also a cow sanctuary farm. There was a self-sustaining garden. It was really quite a wonderful place to grow up. But it did have its own challenges at the same time, because we were kind of living in a bubble that was surrounded by people that weren't necessarily aware of this other way of life. So it brought a lot of challenges, a lot of judgment. And that was kind of my first introduction, or just awareness that I was different than most folks. I was an Argentinian kid living in South Mississippi that was speaking Spanish and had a weird name, and I was vegetarian at that. So going to school became really difficult. That was just an enigma. People didn't know how to approach me.
They didn't know what to do with you.
Yeah. They didn't know what I was about or kind of how I was raised. So with those challenges, I ended up becoming a little bit more reclusive with my home life, because I saw, with having these conversations with other young kids, that they just didn't understand my way of living, and it always ended up kind of at the same point where I would feel really judged, or feel like I had to defend the way I was raised. And it's not a good feeling to have to feel like you defend your morals or your values. And I just stopped talking about it completely. Like, most of my friends growing up didn't know the way I was raised, or the reasons why my name was different, or why I was vegetarian, or why I wore certain necklaces and things like that. And that was pretty much lasted up all the way until I was in high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were a vegetarian your whole life, so you were heavily dependent on dairy for protein. What was that doing to your body internally, and when did you make the switch to veganism?
Yeah, so growing up as a vegetarian, the dairy was like a very big staple of my diet, because it was, satiating. Everybody loves cheese. I used to love yogurt and things like that. And whenever I was about 23, after I graduated college, I moved to California, and I moved to Bakersfield, which is about 2 hours north of here. And there wasn't much to do in Bakersfield. So I would get off work and I would just go to the gym and I started getting a little bit more into fitness, and it was like kind of like my escape. It was my outlet.
Yeah.
And I got more into nutrition, and I was frequenting websites and magazines and seeing what I could eat as a vegetarian, and there wasn't many resources on it. But the resources I did find was telling me that I had to get lots of protein, obviously. So dairy was a really easy source of protein for me. And I became reliant on it, almost like overdid it on whey protein and Greek yogurt and cottage cheese and just regular cheese. And it created a ton of digestive issues for me where I was literally just really gassy all day. It never stopped. And I had acne. My skin was oily. And I just constantly felt puffy. I don't know if that's like a lack of a better term for it, but I just felt like inflamed all the time. That's how I felt. And so it was a big part of my diet until I was about 24, 25. I stumbled across a video of kind of what goes on behind the scenes in the dairy industry. And it was a bit of a turning point for me because I was working at the time as a mechanical engineer. So I worked in a gas processing plant where I was responsible for the machinery and the equipment and all the, the measuring devices that would basically keep the plant operating at its most efficient state. So we weren't wasting any electricity, we weren't wasting any product, and everything was running smoothly. And I stumbled across this video, and it showed a dairy farm, and it showed all of these cows in these really constricted living spaces. I mean, they couldn't move, and they had these devices that were hooked up to their udders that was essentially sucking the milk out of them, that was going to a series of tubes and pumps, and it looked very similar to the processing plant that I worked at.
Wow.
And right then something clicked, and I made the connection that, there's somebody that's just like me that's working at this plant to optimize their systems and to increase their profit margins. And they're really doing it at the expense of these living creatures that didn't choose this life. They didn't ask for it. They were basically born into slavery and they were being exploited. So I made the conscious decision at that point in my life that I didn't want to support those companies anymore because I knew by buying those products I was creating more of a demand. And it would keep the lights on. It would keep that guy, this theoretical engineer that was behind the scenes, it would keep him working harder. And I just made a ethical standpoint against not consuming dairy anymore. And I just didn't know how it was going to affect my performance, my gains, or anything like that. I just thought I was going to make it work.
And you were just starting to be a bodybuilder at this point.
Yeah, at this point I was getting a lot more into fitness as well. So I was making gains, but then I came across this kind of turning point where I was like, okay, now I have to make a choice. Do I continue to eat dairy or do I eliminate it because it doesn't align with my ethics? And I just eliminated it completely and just told myself I'd figure it out. Because I grew up as a vegetarian, people always told me that you could never be an elite athlete, or you needed meat to build muscle, or you needed meat in order to be a powerhouse or be really strong. And I knew it wasn't true because I was making progress as a vegetarian. I had lived without meat my entire life. So I knew there was a lot of misinformation surrounding animal protein, but I didn't know the whole story. And whenever I gave it up, I just introduced plant-based protein shakes into my diet. I introduced a lot more grains and legumes. I really started looking into the research about how much protein we actually need, because it was challenging for me to get the same numbers that I was getting when I was eating dairy and just kind of get this equivalent numbers for protein on a fully plant-based diet.
And you're a numbers guy. I'm
a complete numbers guy. I'm a data guy. I'm very data-driven. So I like to see why and optimize, right? That's like, I like to understand the processes and then how to optimize those processes. And nutrition is no different. Your body is a biological machine. It's a series of processes. And if you learn how to optimize the fuel that you're doing or the work that you're putting in or the recovery process, then you can make gains much quicker than somebody who's doing it very inefficiently.
Okay, so when you went vegan, did you see, so I know that you were a little worried about it, but did you see or feel the difference right away, or did it take some time? What did that look like?
Well, I think naturally when you become more acute to what you put in your body, you can feel this, you become more connected with your body.
For sure.
So if your body's constantly inflamed, you're never really at a state where you feel healthy. You don't know what feels good and what doesn't. It's just your normal. And my normal at that point was constant inflammation, constant gas, acne, feeling lethargic quite a bit. at times as well.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's because my body wasn't meant to process cow's milk. I mean, plain and simple, I'm not a baby cow.
Right.
So there's no need for me to drink milk or have cheese or whey or anything like that. So my body was literally telling me in different ways that this is toxic for me. And after I cut it out, it took about a week before I really noticed a big difference. Like my digestion kind of aligned itself and healed itself. My acne started to go away. I just felt overall like more energized and more light. And I think partly is because my body wasn't fighting off this unknown substance that it was trying to process.
Right. So how did you get into bodybuilding, and when did you decide to go pro?
I stumbled into bodybuilding. I kind of just happened on it. I was at the gym one day, and a friend of mine was working a booth, kind of giving out free samples in the gym. And he saw me and he was like, "Hey man, you're looking really good. You should consider doing bodybuilding, or there's a bodybuilding show coming up." And I literally laughed in his face. I was like, yeah, right. Like I'm gonna get on stage half naked and just like pose in front of a bunch of strangers, like and get spray tan. Like no, that's not me. And the more I thought about it, the more I like was open to the idea, because I wasn't doing anything else. I'm a competitive guy, and I really thought it was going to be putting me outside of my comfort zone and challenging me. So I decided to do that first show right around the same time I went vegan. So I think it was about 9, maybe 8 weeks before the date of the contest.
Okay.
So I had 8 weeks to not only figure out how to prep for a bodybuilding contest, but also how to prep for a bodybuilding contest as a vegan. And as you probably know, most bodybuilding diets consist of waking up, drinking egg whites along with whole eggs, and then washing it down with a whey protein shake, and then having your chicken breast, and then having another chicken breast, and then having fish for dinner. So that's 5 different animals that is pretty much staples in bodybuilding diets. So here's a vegan that doesn't eat any of those, and you have to figure out how to elicit the same results. So I had to get creative. I looked online and I just kind of like figured out ways to make it work, and I tracked everything. I was tracking my weight, my body fat, my strength, and just seeing how my body was changing week by week. And what I found was that I was seeing results because I had 2 other friends that were doing the same show. I was seeing results 2 times faster than they were. They were putting in twice the work and getting half the results than me. And I really think it's because I was optimizing the fuel that I was putting in my body. You know, I mean, plants are filled with antioxidants. I mean, naturally that gets rid of free radicals that are, you know, causing your body to be inflamed. So if you get rid of those free radicals, then you can recover quicker and allow yourself to train more frequently and allow yourself to make gains quicker. So 8 weeks went by and I did the first show and I ended up winning the entire thing. So I think I entered 2 or 3 categories, and I walked home with like 6 trophies that day.
What categories were those?
So it was like the novice category and the open category. So if you're a novice competitor, it's like your first time competing. You don't want to necessarily go against guys that have been competing for years.
Right.
But I was like, I'm just going to try both. And I ended up winning the novice overall. And then I ended up winning the overall open as well.
So cool.
So I walked home with like a ton of hardware. And it was like really like inspiring to just think that, you know, 8 weeks ago, I had no idea about this lifestyle, and then, you know, being able to make such a transformation. So
yeah.
What was funny though, is that afterwards, I stepped off stage and immediately people were congratulating me, and there was a lot of locals that I knew from the gym there that came to watch the show, and they all started asking me the same question, like, what did you eat? Like, what were you eating?
Yeah.
And I would tell them that I was like, I didn't announce it that I was vegan or anything. I just decided to do it on my own. And then once they started asking me questions, I started talking more and more about it, and they were just blown away. They were like, how were you able to produce these types of results without eating any meat or any chicken or any whey protein? And I saw right there that there was a big gap in kind of the knowledge or even the belief that you could do it without it. So I started sharing my story online. And yeah, the rest is history.
So cool.
Yeah, the rest is history.
I'm sure everybody is like, okay, you definitely do steroids. And you're like, no, man, I don't do steroids.
So the first show, that show was a natural show.
Yeah.
So they do drug testing and lie detector testing as well.
They do lie detector?
Yeah, they do lie detector testing. What's ironic is that after that show, I won the overall, and I saw that it made a splash. It made a little bit of a splash in the kind of the fitness community, but the natural shows weren't getting half as much exposure as, say, the Mr. Olympia shows. So I really wanted to compete with like the best of the best and prove to myself that I could compete with those guys. So I made the decision to go over to the IFBB, or is it NPC, which is the amateur league, before feeding into the IFBB, which is like kind of like high school to college to the NFL.
But you just went to college.
Yeah, so I competed in the NPC, which is a non-tested league. So I knew that I was going to go against guys that were taking gear and taking tons of other substances, but I really felt like I could hold my own.
Yeah.
And I did my first NPC show and then won the overall there.
So cool.
So that only reinforced to me that like there was potential to this. And if I could do it here, then maybe I could compete at the next level, which was the professional level. Yeah. So I did another show and qualified to go to Vegas. And Vegas was like the biggest national show of the year. So it's pretty much, it's like the top amateurs that are all striving to get their professional status.
Wow.
And I ended up going, I didn't win the overall there, but I did end up getting my pro status in Vegas.
And what does that look like for people who don't know bodybuilding? Like when somebody says when you say, I got my pro status, like do you win and then they're like, okay, now you're pro? Do you get a card? Like do you pay something?
Yeah, you get a card, essentially. That's like this little card that just says your name and IFBB Pro. But then you're allowed to compete in pro contests. So then it's you against other pros, which is much, much harder because just to get to that pro level, you've already beat this iceberg of other guys. Like there's layers of guys that you've already beat to become a pro. So even to compete at the pro level is very, very difficult. So most people tend to say like, oh, if you don't place in a pro show, then you're not worthy. And it's like, it's completely opposite because those guys are like the creme de la creme. They're the top guys to even earn your pro status.
Yeah.
And even in the pro level, I was doing shows and I was getting top 5 in almost every show that I did. And it just kind of showed that I was on the bubble of making it to the grand stage, which is the Olympia stage. Like that was my ultimate goal because I figured if I could do it as a natural vegan, then that would just open up the door for so many other guys to believe that you could do it without sacrificing your health. Because I hate to say it, but it's like they call it health and fitness, but it's really not that healthy. The majority of the guys are 20s, in their early 20s, and they're already resorting to taking exogenous hormones or steroids or other enhancing drugs that just destroy their organs. It destroys their hormonal health, and it's like a lifetime that they have to recover from.
And regardless of the drugs, I mean, the food that they're eating is killing them as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very animal protein heavy diet.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, they're eating at least 5 or 6 different types of animals a day. And on top of that, the bodybuilding rhetoric is to get more protein. So more protein equals more muscle. At least that's the common misconception.
Right.
But there is a limiting factor there to where no matter how much protein you get, doesn't mean you're going to build more mass.
Right.
But most guys don't understand that. They just kind of take whatever their coach tells them at face value and just apply it. And what happens is these guys will feel really unhealthy, and their cholesterol, their lipid profile, everything is just really, really unhealthy, but they have abs. And they look great on stage.
But so do you.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to show that there was a different approach. I'm not saying that everybody that does bodybuilding is unhealthy, because there are guys that do it correctly and they do it in a healthy manner. But there is an alternative approach that yields the same results,
right?
And you don't sacrifice your health or your longevity. So I just thought it would be like, I just wanted to get the information out there.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't really any other examples that I could have turned to whenever I was first starting my kind of like fitness journey and been inspired by it. So I just I was thinking of those guys, like who would I have looked up to whenever I was younger and a vegetarian, and I always felt kind of like the black sheep because I would look up to NFL players and pro basketball players and baseball players and just knew that they didn't eat the same way I did, so I could never become one of those guys. So I just constantly thought of that younger me and whether or not I would have inspired me when I was younger. And I think that that's kind of been like my ultimate mission, is to reach that audience and show those guys whenever they're young, they don't have to be worried about not being able to be an athlete or a bodybuilder or whatever it is you want to do. You can do it even on a plant-based diet, and you can be compassionate. You don't have to fit this standard idea of what it is to be a manly man, flipping burgers and stuff like that. So Yeah.
Would you say veganism changed the trajectory of your life when you started simply eating differently?
110%. Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
For me too. For many people that I talk to, for Rich, for Dotsy, like it was such a turning point. It's almost like it's a spiritual as well as a physical journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a big believer in that too. I think that in its essence, food is just energy, right? It's an energy exchange. We eat the food and then it becomes part of us. And the food that you eat does have a huge effect on your spiritual connection.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. If you're constantly anxious and you never feel like you have the clarity to see what it is that you really want or who you really are, and it's constantly, there's all this noise that's inhibiting you from really diving deep, then, I think that we should take a look at our food and see what kind of spiritual effect it has on ourselves. Because I really do believe that the food that we eat is either heightening our consciousness or lowering it.
So true.
So if you're eating food that was, let's say cows, for example, if you're eating beef, chances are that cow was raised in a slaughterhouse from the beginning, or raised in a farm where it was taken away for its mother. And then it was sent to factory where they beef up the cows and make them as big as possible, and they are in tight living quarters and they're constantly stressed out, and then at the end of their life they're sent down the assembly line and the disassembly line essentially, and they're in this constant state of stress. I mean, it's like fight or flight. We're animals, we're human animals, we experience the same emotions that they do. So if an animal is on its way to the disassembly line and it's being electrocuted to go where it needs to go, it knows, it has an instinct that it's about to be harmed. So all this adrenaline is pumping through its blood system, cortisol, anxiety, rage, all of these feelings are present whenever the animal is killed. So it's almost like an energetic stamp that is imprinted onto the energy.
Yeah.
And then you consume that energy and essentially you become a little bit more anxious, a little bit more animalistic, a little bit less human, essentially, because I believe that naturally we're compassionate beings.
Yeah.
I just think that we have to reconnect
beautiful.
with that.
That's very true. Very beautiful. What do you eat to prep for your shows, and what do you eat day to day to maintain your physique?
So my prep meals don't really differ too much from what I eat on a daily basis. I just manage the portion sizes a little bit better. Okay. So normally what I'll do, I'll wake up and I'll have like a big smoothie. So I love smoothies. So it's like I wake up excited to eat my smoothie or drink my smoothie. And that has like almond milk, protein powder, chia seeds, flax seeds, ashwagandha. Sometimes I'll do oatmeal in there if I want to bulk up and get some more calories. I'll do peanut butter, I'll do nuts, fruit. I'm a big on fruit. I don't shy away from fruit at all. Even when I'm prepping, I'm not afraid of like the sugars that are, intrinsically in fruit. And then for lunch, I'll normally do like a big Buddha bowl. Nice. So I'll have some type of grain as a base. So either rice or quinoa or pasta or whole grain pasta or something like that. And then I'll do a protein source, which is normally tofu or tempeh. That's like my top two that I really like.
Okay.
Or I'll do sometimes lentils, which are really also high in protein. And I'll do a ton of green vegetables. I always make sure there's lots of color on my plate. Nice. And then I'll put in some avocado, maybe a little bit of dressing. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I also do burritos and pizza and all the other stuff. But I just got to manage, like, you got to track and understand your nutrition to make sure it's the right fuel for what your fitness goal is. So whenever you're trying to lean down for a show, obviously you want to maintain as much of your muscle mass as possible, and you want to kind of chip away at the fat that you're hanging on to. So there's like a delicate balance of a little bit of, reducing your calories. You can adjust your protein and your carb numbers, but it's really just, energy balance, burn more calories than what you're eating and you're going to lose weight.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about soy. Do you eat it? And what's the difference between estrogen and phytoestrogen? And does soy lower testosterone, which we all need to build muscle?
That's a great question, and I get this every single day of my life. Yeah. Like if I post anything online with food or that has soy products, whether it's tofu, edamame, tempeh, maybe even like some of the faux meat stuff that's like soy-based, always people are commenting, and just this is soy phobia, that people think that if you eat soy, your estrogen levels will spike, or you'll get man boobs and your test levels will drop. But in reality, soy contains phytoestrogens. And soy is not the only thing that contains phytoestrogens. There's many other vegetables that contain phytoestrogens. Even beer contains phytoestrogens. So if you're trying to avoid phytoestrogens, you should probably stop drinking beer as well. But anyway, so phytoestrogens are basically plant hormones, and they do have a similar kind of chemical structure as dietary estrogen. And it can attach themselves to our estrogen receptors. But what happens is it'll inhibit real estrogen from attaching to our receptors and signaling your body to, have some hormonal changes. So it's actually beneficial. So it's been shown to reduce estrogen levels. And if you look at the research behind cancer, I mean, if you have elevated estrogen levels, you're more at risk for things like breast cancer or prostate cancer. So it actually has some cancer inhibiting effects, which is really good for, if you're trying to build muscle or just stay healthy.
Right. And I always like to tell people if you're really afraid of soy, you should be afraid of the GMO kind. And guess who's eating the GMO soy? The
animals. Yeah.
And then you eat their flesh. So because 90% of soy grown is fed to
cattle,
farmed animals.
Yeah.
And then so if you're eating meat, you're actually eating the bad kind of soy that you want to avoid.
And I think most of the tofu and soy products on the shelves are organic.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily have to stress too much about non-GMO soy, because a majority like soy milk and tofu, all that stuff is organic. So you're not necessarily getting the GMO soy that's being fed to cattle, which, obviously if you're eating factory farmed animal, chances are you're eating secondhand GMO soy.
Exactly. Okay, so you share quite a powerful and vivid story about how much chicken the average bodybuilder consumes or would need to consume. What does that actually look like? And can you share that story and paint this picture for us? Because you do it in a great way.
Yeah. As you know, I'm a numbers guy. I really like to take a look, because numbers don't lie, plain and simple. That's why I like them. It's very cut and dry when it comes to numbers and crunching them. So I thought to myself, what impact does one person make whenever they eliminate animal products? Not only on their own health, but on the environment as well. And like I mentioned earlier, bodybuilders tend to consume about 2 to 3 times more than an average person. So the standard for bodybuilding is you need to get at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, sometimes up to 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So for me, I weigh 180 pounds. So that would mean, by those standards, I would need at least 180 grams of protein, all the way up to 360 grams of protein. That's a lot of protein. So for simplicity's sake, I thought, what would 180 grams of protein look like if I were to only consume protein from a chicken? Because that's one of the most standard bodybuilding staples of any bodybuilding diet is chicken. Well, it turns out a chicken weighs about 4 pounds. And I think at the usable meat, I forget the exact number, but it would have ended up being that I would have to have at least eaten a full chicken a day to meet that 180 gram, which is the low end of the spectrum. It's the 1 gram per pound of body weight. So 1 chicken per day to meet my protein requirements as a bodybuilder. Now, if you extrapolate that and you eat 1 chicken a day for 365 days a year, that's 365 chickens that is being used to feed 1 bodybuilder. Now, there is also a very inefficient conversion rate between the amount of calories and resources it takes to raise a chicken than the amount of calories and resources that the chicken produces for us to consume. So it's almost like 5 to 1, and sometimes up to 6 to 1. It takes 6 times more resources to produce the same amount of calories from the chicken. So if you think about 365 chickens, how much that is, and then how many resources it takes to raise those chickens, that's a heck of a lot of resources. It's a heck of a lot of water. It's a heck of a lot of grain. So
heck of a lot of cruelty.
A heck of a lot of life, right? So, and that's on the low end of the spectrum. So imagine doubling that, 700 something chickens. That's just their life had to end just for me to build muscle. And it doesn't...
And get heart disease down the road.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, yeah. It just doesn't seem like... It didn't seem logical to me. And then on the flip side, you have, let's say, a plant-based bodybuilder who is getting the same amount of protein from plants, and it is requiring far less resources. And I mean, yeah, plants take resources too. They water and land and space and everything, but it's far less than what it takes, because those lands that would be fed to humans are being fed to the chicken and then being fed to humans. So it's like, if you cut out the middleman and go straight to the source, you eliminate a lot of the other resources. So, I mean, just strictly by eliminating those food sources from your diet, you are making far less of an environmental footprint. And also from a cruelty perspective, you are reducing significantly the amount of suffering that is happening in this world.
Nice. How long did it take you to develop into the size you are now, and what additional methods did you use to achieve it besides your diet?
Well, I started lifting when I was like 19 or 20.
Okay.
And I'm 30 now.
Okay.
But I don't really consider like serious, like I didn't start lifting until I started bodybuilding. Because that's when I really took a look at how I was training and what I was eating and started taking it seriously. Before, I would go to the gym, I would do some curls, I'd do some bench press, and I'd go home. As probably a lot of guys do the same 3 or 4 exercises and then go home. But then once I started really looking at my training style and like kind of adjusting my training philosophy to whatever would maximize my gains, that was about 5 or 6 years ago. And since then, I've probably put on about 30 pounds of size. Maybe a majority of that would be muscle. So I would say a majority of my size I was able to attain after I went vegan, because not only did I optimize my training, I also optimized my nutrition as well, which is a huge factor, because most people think that if you go into the gym and you lift more weights that you're going to get bigger, and there is some truth to that. But, realistically, you could only lift, weights a few more times. Maybe you get a couple extra reps in the gym, maybe do a couple different workouts that'll make you a little bit more sore. But where are the other areas of your life that will really maximize your results? And most of the time it's outside of the gym. Like, lifting and training aside, how good is your nutrition? Are you leaving gains on the table, so to speak? If you take a look at your nutrition, you can get like 15 to 20% more results if you optimize that, if you really focus on that. Not only that, and what's your sleep like? Are you getting good quality sleep? Are you actually hitting that deep REM cycle sleep where your body will allow yourself to release and produce testosterone? Because 70%, I think, don't quote me on this, but a majority of your testosterone is produced whenever we're sleeping. So if you're not able to get into a deep cycle of sleep, then naturally your hormone levels will be off. And if you wake up with extra cortisol every day and extra stress, then stress is catabolic, so meaning that it eats away muscle. So if you're stressed out constantly, if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're eating crappy food, then you're not really producing the best environment for muscle growth. So I would say take a look at every aspect of your life, because it is a very holistic approach.
I like that.
Even simply by being mindful and reducing the amount of stress you have on a day-to-day basis. Just taking a few moments in the morning, 10 minutes is all it takes to just really tap into that parasympathetic nervous system, take some deep breaths, and just, it's stress relieving and it reduces stress. So it's a big factor that people don't necessarily consider. Everybody likes to look at the gym and weights first.
Yeah. And then what about like any supplements?
Well, I think people should always look at their nutrition first, right? Supplements are exactly what the name indicates. They're supplementary to something. So they're supplementing your nutrition. So always look at your nutrition first. And then whatever there is lacking or there is gaps, that's what you should supplement. So supplements are convenient. I will say this. Most people think that if you go vegan, you have to supplement with a ton of different nutrients and vitamins and whatever else. But the reality is you don't. There's about 3 supplements that are limited in a vegan diet. And that's B12. That's vitamin D3, which depending on where you live and the climate you live in, you can get that easily. And DHA and EPA, which is a long-chain fatty acid. And you can easily get that from things like chia seeds or flax seeds or different Brussels sprouts, avocado, things like that. Spirulina, but it comes in the form of like a less active form, which is ALA. And your body has to convert that to DHA and EPA. But if you just want to go ahead and ensure that you're getting enough DHA and EPA, you can just supplement it with an algae oil pill, which you can get anywhere. Just make sure the capsule's vegan. And those are the top 3 that I would say that people that are on a plant-based diet should supplement. Not even on a plant-based diet, just everybody, because there's studies that show that the general population is low and has suboptimal B12 and D3 levels. So it's like 40% of the population, I think. So not just vegans are lacking B12, it's everybody. Apart from that, I do protein shakes because they are very convenient. And especially if you're trying to look at your macros and keep calorie targets at a certain level, protein is a really easy way to hit those numbers. Creatine is another good one that I like to use. It's one of the most studied supplements on the market. It's vegan, it's synthesized, and it's really relatively safe if you take it in small quantities. And it turns out that vegans don't necessarily get too much creatine in their diet because they're inherently tends to come from animal sources.
Don't our bodies produce creatine though?
I think in very small quantities, but it's been shown to help with strength and power and explosiveness. And if you do supplement in vegetarians, the results are actually a little bit greater than if you were to be an omnivorous diet. So it is beneficial for vegans, vegetarians to supplement with creatine.
Cool. And then do you take any specific herbs besides ashwagandha to boost, I don't know, testosterone production?
Yeah, there's a few that I would suggest. Ashwagandha has a lot of healing benefits, not just for testosterone, but also for stress and well-being. Maca is another really good one that enhances libido. It also will help stabilize some hormones.
What is periodization training?
Okay, so periodization training basically means to almost stagger your training style to where you don't plateau. So normally a standard periodization time frame is about 6 weeks. And what they find is that after about 6 weeks, your body will adapt and you will see a point of diminishing returns. So maybe your strength will plateau, maybe your conditioning will plateau. So it's always good to switch your workouts up. I mean, 6 weeks is a standard. You can switch up your workouts however frequently you want. But it is a really good idea if you're trying to continuously make progress. I would say periodize your workouts and also progressively overload your workouts. So that's another kind of technique to basically make sure you don't plateau. So, for example, if you go to the gym and do 3 sets of 10 with the same weight every single time you go in the gym, there's no real reason for your body to adapt. Growth only happens when you are forcing your body to adapt and build new tissue. So you're not going to do that if your body is already used to the type of training that you're doing. So that's why it's good to switch up machines, switch up barbells to dumbbells, switch up from dumbbells to machines, switch up to Smith machines, do different style of training that really force your body to say, hey, what's going on here? I have a deficiency here, so I'm going to create some new muscle tissue here. So you can either switch up your workouts, or another thing would be to switch up your rep ranges. So instead of doing 3 sets of 10, next time you go into the gym, you can do 5 sets of 8 or something like that, where you increase the workload and the volume of your training too. All of those different things will help you not plateau, essentially, which is a big issue for most people because they go to the gym and they kind of spin their wheels. And that's why they don't see results, is they're not really pushing themselves and changing up their strategy.
Let's chat about GameChangers.
Yeah, let's do it.
How did you get involved, and what has it been like to be part of such an influential documentary about vegan athleticism?
I'm so blessed to be part of this project with the GameChangers. I am so grateful that James and Joseph and the whole GameChangers crew just invited me to join it. James actually reached out to me in 2016, and we had talked. He was really excited about the film, and he told me about kind of what he was doing behind the scenes. I had no idea. I'd never heard of it before, and he reached out directly, and I was immediately intrigued and excited, and I told him whatever I could do to help, I'm here for you. And I had no idea. He had already told me they wrapped up filming, and there wasn't any possibility of me getting into the film. And then in 2017, late 2017, he called me up one day, and he's like, hey, we're filming in Orange County, we're filming another physician, and we may have a 12-hour window where we can film you.
Wow.
Because we'll have the camera crew ready. So I was in the middle of a bulk.
Oh boy.
And I was also getting on a plane to go to Canada with my sister. And
That very second,
I was in the airport. And he's like, hey, we can shoot you in 10 days. Are you willing to, do you want to shoot? And I was like, heck yeah, I do. But I'm not in show conditioning at all. And he's like, well, just do your best. You look good. And I was like, oh my God, I got to lose 12 pounds before this shoot. So I was in Canada. We were doing a road trip up through the Canadian Rockies. And I was literally waking up at like 4 a.m. and doing cardio and finding gyms and trees to do pull-ups on and just trying my best to be vegan in Canada, which is kind of hard to eat right in the Canadian Rockies. And 10 days later, we ended up shooting. And it was just an awesome experience overall. We ended up shooting workouts for like 12 hours. And Luis Ahoyas, who's the director, he's a perfectionist. And I remember shooting this one scene where we're doing bicep curls, and he was like, I really want to get a close-up of your biceps. And I have this vision of your biceps. And I was like, all right, cool. I started off with like 50s or 60-pound dumbbells, and I was like curling them. And then we ended up doing like 3 hours.
Wait, can we just talk about, I really want to get a close-up of your bicep? Like somebody said that to you in your lifetime.
It's weird. It's weird. These biceps are like, I don't know, they're my money makers. They're like, I'm only relevant because of these biceps, to be completely honest. But I'm grateful for them, so thank you. But we ended up shooting for 12 hours.
Wow.
And like I said, I was starting off with like 60 pounds. So I was like, all right, I'm going to look strong. I'm going to push some weight.
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. And we shot this one exercise for like 2 hours.
Were you super sore?
Yeah, by the end of it, I was at like 20s.
Oh
I was like 20s, like trying to get it up. And I was like, man, they're going to think vegans are like super weak. You know, I'm curling 20 pounds.
What did they show in the movie?
I don't know what they showed in the movie. I don't think they actually showed the weight number, but it must have been like maybe 30 pounds.
It's like a little behind the scenes that you can look for.
So don't judge me if I'm only curling 30 pounds in the film.
He was doing it for 12 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was the process like getting on Muscle and Fitness? And did you know you were going to be on the cover?
No. So ironically, I had shot for Muscle and Fitness the week after I turned pro in 2016. That opportunity came up, and they had a spread that they were shooting for, and they wanted me to be the model. So I showed up, was super excited, and we shot for like 10 hours for this first copy. And the magazine finally came out, and I was so excited to see my face in the magazine. And turns out they didn't credit my name at all. So nowhere in the first edition, or the first time I was in a magazine, did it say my name.
Why? Did you know why?
No, I don't necessarily know why, but I just remember thinking I was super proud of myself, and I just remember thinking, it's okay, the next time I'm gonna be on the cover. And I like manifested it. Whoa. And I just thought about it for a while, and 2 years later, I was competing at the Arnold Classic, and I was preparing for it, and Muscle and Fitness calls me up, and they say, hey, we were wondering if you're available for a shoot. We have a spread that we want to do. And I said, yeah, I mean, that's cool, but like, can I talk about something? And they were like, well, what do you want to talk about? I was like, well, can we talk about like the fact that like I'm doing this on a plant-based diet. I'm the only vegan in the league right now, and I would love to just share my story. And he was like, let me talk to the editors and see what they say. And they came back and they were like, yeah, we'll do an interview on you. And we did a phone interview, and then we were going to shoot. And I showed up for the shoot, and they were like, we're going to do a cover try. And I was like, what's a cover try? And I'm like, well, we're going to try to get you on the cover.
That's so cool.
And we shot, and I try to keep my expectations really low just because the previous experience was not even crediting my name. And about like a month later, they didn't tell me that I was getting the cover. And somebody sends me a picture of this magazine, and I was like, where did you get? I was like, is that me? Like, what? And I finally got the magazine.
That's so
and
cool.
There's like a 10-page spread in there.
Open it. Here we go.
Yeah. So this is like a 10-page spread, and it's all highlighting the benefits of meatless muscle. And it's even got like a little cow right here with the like no cow. And it talks about like the whole story. And I was so blown away that they would give me an opportunity to talk about being vegan in the biggest fitness magazine in the country.
I know, right? So was there like a vegan who was higher up that kind of helped this happen, or was
I heard
pushing
that
it along?
I heard that maybe there was somebody on the inside that was vegan and maybe looking out, or maybe they just wanted to help propel this message.
Yeah.
But this particular magazine was translated into multiple different languages, in Chinese, French, Bulgarian, German, Turkish. I have like all these different covers, so it literally went global. And I can only imagine the impact that it's been able to make. I mean, I actually got a message from a guy recently that said that he was incarcerated, and he got his hands on this copy of Muscle and Fitness, and he read my article, and he actually went vegan in prison.
I hope it changed the trajectory of his life too.
It did. And he came out of prison. He's now out of prison, and he is now like a vegan advocate. He's only talking about like health and mindfulness and taking a look at what we eat. And I've been like in communication with him to help him like kind of like kickstart his journey. And it was just like, it's amazing that magazine went so far.
I love that it did. It deserves it. What are Vegan Fitness and Generation V podcast? What are your goals with them?
We wanted to create a resource where people would feel comfortable and confident that they were getting the right information from the right people. So we've teamed up with many of the top plant-based doctors, some of which you've had on your show.
My buds.
Yes, and they are super excited to endorse us because there is a bit of a gap in the market when it comes to plant-based performance and finding out the right resources for athletes that want to transition to a vegan diet but don't necessarily know how. And there's a lot that they're risking, essentially, because they could be risking their livelihood. You know, if there's somebody behind them that's, you know, trying to get the edge on them and they decide to take this risk of going plant-based and changing up their nutrition, then they want to be 100% confident that they're going to excel and not lose their performance. Right? So we've helped many athletes transition into a vegan diet, whether they were already vegan and we optimize their training and nutrition, or they are curious and they convert to a fully plant-based diet. And it's been amazing. It's kind of like my new project that I really hope to make successful and just really get it in front of as many people as possible.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then Generation V podcast.
Yeah, Generation V, for me, is my favorite platform. It's similar to this. It's a conversation. You know, you can really get to know somebody when you sit down with them and you have a real conversation, because nowadays we have surface level conversations so many times. And I've met so many people, like amazing, incredible people along this journey, that I wanted to document some of it and share their story and give them a voice, whether they're relatively unknown or if they already have a following and I think they have an amazing message. So I really think that Generation V, the reason why I chose the name Generation V was because, you know, you hear about Generation X and Generation Y and all these things, and I think that Generation V speaks to the next generation of young people that are consciously making an effort to make the world a better place. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be vegan. I don't want to exclusively interview vegans. I really think that there's so many amazing people out there, and especially like the younger generation, like those are going to be the next politicians. Those are going to be the next actors and athletes and like, you know, just people that are influencing the world.
Yeah.
So it's better that we speak to them at a younger age and inspire them early on.
For sure.
And really showcase other people that look like them, that talk like them, that and inspire them to go on and do the same thing.
Yeah, I love it. Last question. What is your ultimate goal in life right now?
I think my ultimate goal is to just continue to try my best to make the world a better place at whatever capacity that is. I'm just going to continue to try to do that, because I really feel like the work that we're doing and the work that you're doing and the work that so many of our peers are doing is it's creating a global shift.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talk about things on a macro level all the time. We talk about, you know, making a bigger impact on the environment and reducing animal suffering and all this stuff. But really, it boils down to the closest people that we know. I mean, realistically, we have like 5 or 6 people that we really care about. And everybody is within that 5 or 6 group of people for someone. So on that level, if you could help, you know, a family member, for example, that may have lost their life to early death, say cancer or something that was caused by lifestyle factors. If you could go back in time and share this information with them about changing up their diet and just eliminating certain foods in their diet and replacing them with something else. And in turn, that would allow them to live a longer, happier life and be around for your grandchildren and all of these other things. Like, would you do it? Would you share that information with them? And I think that most people would. So, you know, if you would do it for them, then why wouldn't you do it for yourself as well? Like, you know, that your children deserve to be, you know, enjoying themselves with you long until your old age. And, you know, you also deserve to be there for your great grandchildren. So I think that's why I do what I do, and I think that even if it's just one person at a time, that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Nice. Thanks so much for tuning in. Love, Gianna and
Nimai.